In 356 BCE, in the Macedonian capital of Pella, a child was born who later unsettled the entire ancient world. His name was Alexander. He arrived not in a quiet corner of Greece, but inside a kingdom that was rising fast and thinking big. Macedon sat on the edge of the Greek world, close enough to be drawn into its struggles and strong enough to profit from them. Alexander's father, King Philip II, built Macedon into a hard, disciplined power. He did not rely on tradition or speeches. He relied on control over nobles, over soldiers, over neighboring lands. Each success made Macedon more confident and its enemies more nervous. Alexander's mother, Queen Olympias, came from a royal line outside Macedon, and her presence tied the young prince to wider ambitions and sharper rivalries at court. Beyond Macedon, the Greek city-states stayed divided. Athens, Sparta, Thebes, and many others competed, fought, and distrusted one another, even when the danger was obvious. That disunity weakened them. It made them predictable. While they argued over leadership and freedom, Macedon gained time to organize and grow. Alexander's birth, in that moment, mattered because the Greek world was vulnerable, and a single united kingdom stood ready to take advantage. Alexander did not grow up like an ordinary prince. From childhood, he was pushed hard, taught to ride, to fight, and to lead men who were older than he was. One moment came to define that drive. A powerful horse named Bucephalus had thrown every handler. Alexander noticed the animal feared its own shadow. He turned it toward the sun, calmed it, and rode it. He had proved something early. He mastered what others feared. That boldness needed direction, so Philip arranged the best education money and power could buy. Aristotle arrived, already famous as a thinker, and he trained the teenager to argue, to read, and to judge. Alexander absorbed stories of Greek gods and heroes, but also practical lessons about politics and human nature. He learned to see Greece not just as rival cities, but as a shared culture. And he learned that ideas could be weapons as sharp as any spear. The training did not soften him, it sharpened him. Alexander's mind filled with Homeric glory and the belief that a great life demanded great actions. He did not simply want to rule Macedon, he wanted to stand above ordinary kings, like the heroes he studied, measured against the past and judged by fame. By his late teens, ambition stopped being a dream and became a plan. The boy who tamed Bucephalus started to imagine taming the wider world. In 338 BCE, the pressure between Macedon and the Greek city-states finally broke at Chaeronea. Athens and Thebes, long rivals, stood together because Philip's rise threatened them both. If they stopped him here, Greece stayed free to choose its own future. If they failed, the balance of power ended. For Alexander, still very young, this was not training anymore. It was the moment he had to prove he belonged beside his father. Philip commanded the Macedonian army with discipline and a clear plan, using heavy infantry to hold the center and cavalry to strike where the line cracked. Alexander fought near the decisive action, where a small mistake could collapse everything. The battle turned into a test of nerve as much as strength. Step by step, Macedon forced openings and widened them. When the Greek formation broke, it broke fast. Alexander's role in that break mattered, because reputation followed results. Chaeronea changed Greece in a single day. Athens and Thebes, the strongest voices among the city-states, no longer set the terms. Macedon did. The defeat did not just cost men on a battlefield. It ended the idea that the Greek cities could resist as equals against Philip's kingdom. For Alexander, it delivered something just as important as victory: credibility earned in public, in front of the whole Greek world. From that point on, he looked less like an heir and more like a commander. In 336 BCE, everything that looked settled suddenly broke. Philip II was assassinated, and Macedon lost the one man who held its victories together. Power did not pass smoothly to a seasoned heir. It landed on Alexander, still a teenager, and it happened fast. In that instant, the question across the kingdom was simple. Could this young man keep control, or would the whole structure collapse? The doubt did not stay quiet. Rivals watched for weakness. Allies weighed their chances. Inside the court, the usual struggle over succession sharpened because a boy king invited risk. Outside Macedon, the Greek city-states that Philip had forced into line sensed an opening, and restless factions stirred. Legitimacy mattered now more than bloodline. Alexander had to prove he was not just Philip's son, but Philip's replacement. So Alexander's reign began under pressure, not celebration. Every delay encouraged rebellion, and every rumor of instability spread. If he failed to secure the throne, Macedon's army could splinter, and the Greek world could slip out of reach. His first challenge was not Persia, not conquest, not glory. It was survival. Before he could lead anyone forward, he had to make people accept one hard fact. He was king. By 335 BCE, the question was no longer whether Alexander held the throne, but whether Greece would accept it. The city-states tested him the moment they sensed weakness. He moved fast. He marched south before resistance could spread, and he demanded obedience from leaders who had only recently been forced under Macedonian control. It was not diplomacy that decided it. It was speed, pressure, and the clear promise of punishment. The harshest lesson fell on Thebes, a powerful Greek city that rose in open revolt. Alexander treated it as a warning to everyone else. He attacked, broke the city, and wiped out any idea that Macedon could be pushed aside by courage alone. The message travelled faster than his army ever could. Other cities backed down, alliances collapsed. Greece returned to submission, not because it wanted to, but because it could not resist. With Greece forced quiet, Alexander finally gained what every ruler needed before a foreign war, a secure rear. The Macedonian war machine, its drilled infantry, its hard-riding cavalry, its officers trained to act quickly, no longer had to look over its shoulder. He did not have to fight on two fronts. He could now turn the entire force outward. The direction was clear. East toward the Persian Empire, and toward a campaign that would redefine his rule. In 334 BCE, Alexander finally acted. He led his army out of Europe and crossed the narrow water into Asia, the doorstep of the Persian Empire. Many expected a fast strike, grab treasure, punish old enemies, then go home. Persia's local commanders gathered first, aiming to crush him before he could settle in. It became a test of seriousness. One wrong move and the invasion ended at the shoreline. The Persians chose to block him at the Granicus River, a sharp boundary meant to slow his charge and break his cavalry. Alexander attacked anyway. He drove straight into the crossing under fire, forcing the fight at close range where confusion favored speed and discipline. Persian horsemen pushed back hard, but the Macedonian line kept moving forward. When the Persian front collapsed, it did not look like a skirmish, it looked like control. That first victory mattered beyond the bodies on the riverbank. With the Persian commanders beaten, the western edge of the empire lay open, city after city, suddenly unsure who could protect them. Alexander did not turn around. He pressed inland, taking supplies, securing routes, and showing he meant to stay. The Granicus proved the invasion was not a raid for glory. It was the beginning of conquest, with momentum on his side. In 333 BCE, the Persian king Darius III finally came in person to stop Alexander. They met near Issus, squeezed between mountains and sea. Darius had numbers, but the ground denied him space. Alexander struck hard at the center and aimed straight for the king. Darius broke first and fled. That one moment changed everything. It was no longer a border war, it was a fight for Persia itself. After Issus, Alexander did not chase Darius deep inland. He turned south along the coast, step by step, taking the ports that could feed a Persian fleet. Some cities opened their gates and kept their lives. Others resisted and paid for it. At Tyre, a strong island fortress, the siege dragged on for months. Alexander built his way across the water and forced entry. The message spread fast. Resistance brought ruin. With the coast falling, Persian control of the eastern Mediterranean collapsed. Alexander moved through the region as both conqueror and administrator, accepting surrender, placing garrisons, and demanding loyalty. He balanced fear with negotiation, using local leaders when it suited him and removing them when it did not. By 332 BCE, his campaign looked different. He had not just invaded Persian territory. He had started to act like the ruler of a growing empire. In 331 BCE, everything came down to one battle, Gaugamela. Darius III gathered a huge force and chose open ground, expecting numbers and space to crush the Macedonians. Alexander did not meet that strength head-on. He pushed, pulled, and broke the Persian line at a single point. Once the center gave way, the rest followed. Darius fled again. This time the empire's authority cracked in public. After Gaugamela, cities that once looked to the Persian king now had to decide fast. Babylon opened its gates, and Alexander entered not as a raider, but as the new power. The message spread ahead of him. Resistance looked pointless. Cooperation looked safer. From there he moved to Susa, another royal center, and took its treasuries and administration into his hands. He did not just win territory, he took the empire's working parts. Then came Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of Persian rule. By entering it, Alexander stepped into the place where Persian kings had defined their authority. The capture of its wealth and symbols mattered as much as any battlefield. It told subjects, rivals, and allies the same thing. The old court no longer commanded obedience. Power had transferred. The Macedonian king now stood where the Persian great king had stood, and the world adjusted around that fact. After Persepolis, the war did not end. From 330 BCE, Alexander drove east, chasing Darius III as the Persian king fled toward the far provinces. It became a pursuit across enormous distances, and it ended with a shock. Darius was killed by his own men. Alexander had lost his enemy, but not the fight. Central Asia rose in resistance, and his campaign turned into years of hard marching, sieges, and brutal counterattacks to hold what he claimed. To control these distant lands, Alexander changed how he ruled. He took local nobles into his service, used Persian officials, and demanded court customs that many Macedonians hated. He blended forces too, adding new cavalry and recruits from the east, and he pushed his officers to accept a wider empire than the one they thought they had conquered. It tightened his grip, but it also created a new danger. His own army began to feel replaced, and trust inside his camp thinned. In 327 BCE, he crossed into India, fighting through mountain peoples and then meeting stronger kingdoms beyond. In 326 BCE, he faced King Porus at the Hydaspes, won, and kept moving east, believing the next river would lead to the edge of the world. Instead, his men hit their limit. After years of heat, wounds, and endless campaigning, they refused to march farther. Alexander turned back, forcing a return through hostile ground, and the conquest finally began to slow. In 323 BCE, Alexander reached Babylon with a plan that still ran forward. He reorganized his forces, prepared new campaigns, and ruled an empire stretched across continents. Then, at just 32, he fell violently ill and died. The shock was immediate because everything depended on one man. He left no clear adult heir, no settled handover, and no single chain of command. His death turned a conquest into a problem of ownership. Generals who had shared his victories now competed to control the lands he had taken. They fought, negotiated, and reshaped borders again and again until the empire broke into successor kingdoms, separate states run by rival Macedonian warlords. The result looked nothing like Alexander's united dominion. It became a patchwork of powers built from his ruins. And yet the story that survived was not the collapse, it was the speed. People remembered the young commander who, by about 25, had crushed the Persian royal system and taken its great capitals. That image grew larger than the messy aftermath, and it still set the standard for conquest today. The uncertain prince from Macedon faded. In his place stood a legend that seemed inevitable.